Last research series of the year. Everybody, wonderful to see you. We know it's a very busy time of term, so thanks for coming out. Before we turn to our distinguished speaker for today, we just had one final celebration, right? Of sort of tidbits kind of reflecting back on this spring in particular, because it's been a busy one for all the awardees and fellows who have been presenting. So just quick lightning round. Ariana, great job again. Returning next year as a research award recipient, recipe conflict. We have Andrew, who besides researching political economy is also an excellent violinist at the Hootenanny. So thanks to Andrew. Shannon, of course, on so many fronts. Thank you. Also returning as a research awardee, along with some other roles which we're excited about in the spring. Britt, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to Kenya. That's going to be great. Also returning as a research award recipient next year. Bautron, excellent presentation on commons via community-driven governance. Stephanie, of course, Stephanie just did a great job just this last week. And also a returning research awardee, of course, for next year. We have the maestro and now the first ever doctor from Colombia, from Jacob Diego. So bravos all around here. And then, yeah, absolutely. So Felipe Chen, I mean, this has just been an outstanding spring. Thanks to Carrie again for putting all of this together. It takes a lot of work to coordinate. We're so appreciative. And thanks to all of you. It's going to be an excellent summer. Look forward to seeing you, Minnie, back in the fall. Oh, no. And I think, Jess, thanks so much again for moderating here and for kicking us off.
Okay, welcome to the very last research series of the semester. You survived up till this point. I think another week is probably feasible for some of us. I'm delighted to welcome and introduce Professor Itai Beeri. I apologize, I never checked with you. Is Itai?
It's okay.
Itai is good? Okay.
Reverse.
Who's an associate professor at the Department of Public Administration and Policy at the School of Political Sciences at the University of Haifa in Israel. He's actually a visiting faculty member this year at the O'Neill School of Public Policy, right, and Environment. And his work really focuses on public administration and policy with focus on local governance and democracy and regionalism and local networks and entrepreneurship. And this paper is super interesting because it really relates to his work on sort of human wild animal relationships in urban spaces. So I'm super excited about this. I had a wonderful conversation with Itai earlier in the year about this work and is how we came to be presenting it here. So we're really grateful that you're here to talk about willingness to pay more taxes during a local environmental crisis, the case of wild boars in the Haifa Municipality. So let's welcome Professor Beeri, and we're looking forward to talk.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited. It's part of a much larger project. So you're very welcome to have any possible comments. That would be great. So allow me to start with a short video. Oh my God. Take a minute.
We'll see, right?
Was there a moment ago?
Of course.
Sometimes when you exit out of it and then go play that in the slideshow, it'll.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Try exiting out of the actual PowerPoint. Not like shutting the PowerPoint down, just like going to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could just
try.
There you go. Yeah.
So this is a brief introduction. It's a movie I took 3 weeks ago in Haifa. It all happened at the same afternoon, and let me speak for the main characters.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the source of the.
That explains.
This is male number 1, very relaxed. This is a female.
Oh wow! Yeah. So big.
She's wonder whether I cross between two buses. Looks very relaxed at the moment, rushing up a little bit. So this is the almost first accident, number one.
No.
It's the same female, she's quite hungry, and you can see they are moving around not to interfere. This is a family already. These youngs are probably 3 months old. Probably say something like, "Don't go too far, kids, wait for me." Then she found something very interesting, food for dogs. Oh yeah, and then she appreciated the people of Haifa who leave a lot of food in the streets every day. This guy is very unhappy with that. This is mine, this is my territory.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes the food out there. Now, there are some dogs which are very nervous. They are barking. It's crossing. This is accident almost number 2. That was very fast, so you will see that once again, but almost an accident between the motorcycle and the car. See, they stopped immediately. But she has three mammals, so apparently they left behind. So what are they going to do? Specialist says they know where she is, but they are not necessarily know. Now listen to them. It's not accidentally, they are picking the crossroad. It's number 3 or number 4 already. Luckily, they have green light at the moment, so they are not in a danger.
Love that.
They are very nervous. And this is almost accident number 5, I think. Okay. So I will try to convince myself and you that there is local environmental crisis over here, because it is not necessarily accepted by everybody. So the environmental crisis or the urban environmental crisis dynamic starts, I think, from the public space. You can see many things like that. Then it goes to the private property from public space.
Oh, jeez.
Then the local press is heavily influenced by the phenomena. Haifa became the wild boar capital of Israel. Then the national press.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we've stopped sharing screen.
Oh,
Wanna
yeah.
go back to
Okay.
doing
Yeah,
that?
good call.
Okay.
Apologize. I just want to make sure our folks online can see as well. They're really good pictures. Okay.
So very quickly, public space, local or private property, local press, national press, and even sometimes international press. Then we go to politics, and there is a huge and ongoing blame game over the last 3 or 4 years. First, residents versus the local council. Then residents versus the mayors, particularly. Then council opposition versus the mayor. Then mayor versus the residents, and mayor versus the national government. and the local press versus the mayor. Then the mayor versus the local council. I'm going through that very quickly, but apparently the mayor, she has lost completely the majority in the council, and she didn't succeed to approve the annual budget. And she has probably finished her political career. Then and only then you will have local environmental policy. This is campaign number 1. It's mainly about subsidizing fences. And then campaign number 2 is trying to convince people not to leave open garbage cans, not to feed animals in the street. We used to call it the Haifa buffet. Right? Animals, wild animals really like to come up from the wadis and so on. Now, then and only then the research starts. It took me a while to understand this phenomena, but there is and one open question that I ask every year in my survey. And in 2020, I was really shocked to see that the most urgent issue that the Haifa Municipality needs to address, wild boars came to the first place, and that air pollution was left behind. And it continued to increase and increase. Like 35% of participants, of 500 people, mentioned wild boars as the most urgent issue to address. Now, let's go to the research itself. We are a group of a couple of scholars. My mates are specialists in human-animal behaviors and human-animal relationship. We're trying to answer the call of Jerry Mitchell in PAR recently, who stated that the expectation is that a focus on non-human species can shapeshift the field to a biocentric outlook and a truly authentic understanding of public affairs. So from a theoretical point of view, the framing is quite difficult. You can think of many aspects and viewpoints and disciplines that are part of wild boars in the streets. We will try to concentrate on some of them in this specific paper, but except of local economy, crisis management, local government, governance, democracy, anthropology, local environmental policy, you can see that almost each and every one of them is related to the issue. And maybe it's too much for one paper. Maybe there is a necessity here to split it, but the background, the theoretical background lies at local environmental crisis and crisis management, policy support, and particularly local taxation or the willingness to pay more, not the willingness to pay, which is usually being under investigation, the willingness to pay more local taxation in order to deal with some environmental policy support, and human-wild animals interaction and urbanism. When I came to Bloomington, people told me 1 year ago, yeah, we have the same problem, pointing to deers. However, it's not the same. I think the difference lies in the weight of the wild boars, the fact that they can live almost anywhere, eat almost everything, and they might be very aggressive if they think that their territory, food, or young are in danger. By the way, they were here in Haifa, almost always for thousands of years. What happened recently is that massive constructions, likely something like 3 or 4 tunnels behind the Carmel Mountain for transportation, and with many explosions, a policy decision to stop thinning, wild boars, and the COVID-19, which took many people out of urban space. And those 3 or 4 together made their population to enlarge. They live in group, coming in large groups, sometimes even 20 or 30 individuals. And they can have up to 12 into liters a year. By the way, if you thawing them, or if you use thawing, they, like many other mammals and species, understand that there is a danger and having more cubes or cubs every year. And the most important thing that they are very smart, intelligent, adaptable. For example, they can jump above a fence, open garbage can, and cross the street. Now, we have something like 3 main assumptions. One, that paradoxically, global decline in wild species, and in the same time, there is an increase in wild population within urban areas. We see that municipalities are the one that face human-wild boars interaction, and they consider it as a wicked problem. And we utilize a groundbreaking approach called the animalscapes, which sees non-human animals as stakeholders, as political stakeholders, as political agents, and as public animals. So taking everything into account, our research question is how structural, socioeconomic, political, democratic, and human-animal interactions factors are related to policy support. That is, the willingness to pay more local taxes to deal with an environmental crisis. We used a survey experiment of 500 adults from Haifa. These are the independence variables. The more interesting one is the extent of harm caused by wild boar. And policy support should be explained as well. We had this experiment. I'll give you a spoiler. It didn't work. Actually, it's worked the other way around. But half of the respondents got a very short, laconic message saying that the municipality is considering raising property taxes. And the other 50% got a much more detailed announcements with a logo, with an explanation, with a rationale. But again, the spoiler is that we were hypothesizing that those who will be exposed to more information will be more willing to pay taxes, and we got exactly the opposite result than expected. We use choice-based conjoint for the willingness to pay more taxes, meaning that each participant got these 3 options: a full plan, which cost 200 new Israeli shekels, something like per month, something like $50 per month. Half plan or partial plan, 100 shekels, and without any intervention, 0 shekels. And another options, which is, this one is more expensive. The maximum is 200 shekels. Here, the maximum is 100 shekel, and just to have a different option. So you have a guess how many people, what is the percentage of respondents who prefer to pay more taxes, even though they were offered to pay less? Because we were afraid that everybody would rather to pay the minimum. But apparently, for more than 40% rather the higher price. And the percentage of respondents who prefer to pay more taxes than though they have been offered to pay 0 shekels is almost 46%. And now for the main results. Over here, we can see that those who voted for the mayor and or preferred or presented or responded to the economical prospect were the ones who were the most to, or they were the one that their will to pay more was the highest. So we can see here there is a matter of economic or local taxation and also politics, those who voted for the mayor 3 years before. Over here, you can see that's trust. Trust in local government is an issue. The more residents trust local government, the more they are willing to pay more. And obviously, or not sure it's obviously, but when it's an economical prospect, the percentage are higher than when it's an expensive prospect. When it comes to tax burden, you can see the upside down or the opposite direction. And here is another example, harm caused by wild boar, those who were feeling or expressed larger, well, I would say harmed, or they felt that they are harmed by wild boars to a greater extent, were more willing to pay more taxes. And I will expand that a little bit more. This is the full model, and I will enlarge it and claim that the following groups are willing to pay more. Women, those who trust the local authority, those who are feeling they were damaged by the wild boars, those who tend to participate and in local affairs, and those who feel that have a high or heavy load of tax burden are less willing to participate, and those who vote for the mayor in the past are more willing to pay taxes. And the manipulation, you can see, worked exactly the opposite way we were hypothesized. So to conclude, local environmental crisis in relation to this issue, wild boars, is a case of environmental crisis. As far as we understand, it is multidimensional, and it's probably a wicked problem. When it comes to willingness to pay more, not all residents want to pay the minimum possible tax. When presented with moderate and economic option, they are more willing to pay more municipal taxes. When it comes to social, economic, and local politics and government factors, they are playing a role. Women, more religious, those who are armed by wild boars, those who voted for the mayor, and those who trust the local authority are more willing to pay extra municipal taxes. When it comes to crisis management, we can think of information overload. Apparently, during an ongoing urban environmental crisis, residents who were exposed to less detailed municipal policy were more willing to pay extra municipal taxes. And in regards to local taxation compared to a national tax, probably local taxation may be interpreted as a more concrete, contractual, direct give and take payment. And online, modern, choice-based conjoint, multi-choice consumption of local services may increase policy support. That's it for now.
All right, thank you very much. I'm gonna keep the queue here. And okay, we've got Ann, Bernie, and then James, Shannon. All right.
Okay, so 2 points. Really interesting project. A good comparison might be their populations in the Northeast United States and in Canada. Because they're another large, dangerous. It's been a big success story with recovery, but we have increasing interactions with human populations. So that might be worth looking at. The other thing is, have you thought about digging down a layer and looking at willingness to pay more with respect to specific management policies. I think you might get a wider diversity, right? If you're, you know, like say, something that would reduce the fertility of the boars, something that would improve their or increase the amount of natural habitat away from the city, right? Other, you know, and various other hunting seasons, you know, all that kind of stuff. Those are all options, and I can imagine that public support in terms of willingness to pay would be at least potentially highly differentiated between specific policies.
You can respond. Yeah, you're going to respond, and then we'll go to the next one.
First of all, thank you very much. Looking on other places is a very good idea, because I think there are something like 50 cities around the world that face more or less the same problem. Unfortunately, Haifa is very proud of other people coming to learn from the experience. Now, going to specific public policy, it's very interesting. I can tell you that we've measured support for two specific policies: fining and punishing those who feed animals, and more than 90% of the population is in favor of this kind. Now, since the problem is so complex, I think, and I'm not the expert, it would be wise to shut in all ways. I mean, to use all the tools you can imagine at once. And still then it will be very, very, very difficult. So I'm not sure there is a practical way to use only one kind of, it's also fawning, it's also fences, it's also feeding areas and water in the valleys. It's also not feeding animals. I'm not an expert in this side, but I know there are people around the world that are trying to develop, I'm not sure about the word, something that you can throw from the air, from a helicopter, that will not decrease other species or not harm other species, but would make the female to have less or no.
What could go wrong there? Yeah.
So this is probably the final solution.
Yeah.
Phrase, but
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
It's in Australia.
yeah, just in response, I understand that a large package of policies are necessary, but it would give policymakers some idea of some things that are beyond the pale as far as taxpayers are concerned. It would rule out something.
Bernie was next.
So I teach urban ecology, so this fits into things that we covered urban ecology. Boars are an issue in the United States and in Texas, but there's a recent, I'll say, invasion of Canadian wild boars into Minnesota. So it's becoming quite an issue. It's not quite urban yet, it's suburban, but that just doesn't get there. Two other species that there's a research group in wildlife out of Ohio State, and they study urban foxes, particularly in Chicago, and been doing it for years. And a couple of things they've learned in their studies, and foxes aren't like boars in the tree, but the fox's home range in Chicago is smaller than their wild home range because there's so much food available. And the second thing is the foxes have figured out one-way streets, and when they cross a one-way street, they only look one way. And they've got a video that shows it. This fox gets to the intersection, looks one way and goes. And then the other thing that is cougars, which have in the West are a significant issue. And for a long time, sort of like your boars, they were considered a curiosity, and they were, you'd see a cougar in the suburbs and you go, oh, that's really cool. Well, then they had an attack and a death of a runner in Denver, in the Colorado Springs area. Well, that all of a sudden changed the attitude. And then there's another cougar study in LA. And again, it was because of a death. So, so there's all, and again, these are more wildlife ecology researchers, not in your perspective of policy, but you might see some policy pointing out. So it's a good, there's a lot of examples to look for.
Yeah, this is very interesting. There are a lot of examples. I didn't mention that, but apparently this is one case of a huge clash between the city and nature.
Yeah.
We used to think about the city as a safe place of many aspects or of many dangers. One of them is nature. And as we can see, nature and the city are becoming not one space, but a shared space. And I would just add to your list that I think javelina is a kind of wild boar, some species of wild boar, I think in Texas.
Yeah, and the Texas, and they were released down there for hunting on game farms, but the boars got so, there weren't enough hunters to take care of the boars. And so the boars now are everywhere and they're disturbing farm operations, but they're in the suburbs. So they've created a different situation.
James was next.
Oh, this is really interesting to me. It's I appreciate you presenting this, and it's an interesting topic. So I got loads of questions. So tell me when it's not my turn any longer.
Slow down.
So you weren't exploring lethal means of management. And I'm curious if that was something that came up in conversations, or if the city, maybe it falls outside of your research, but has the city ever discussed lethal management and just killing the wild boars and going for like total eradication? Because
to kill all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the moment, it's not on the table. If they are finding specific individuals who an expert on behalf of one of the green organizations come into conclusion that this specific individual will not return to the body anymore. I mean, if he was born in the city and is used to eat, I don't know, pasta with great fresh vegetables, you will not be able to convince him to have these, I don't know, small things on the ground. And if he is not afraid anymore of people and cars, this one you might shut him legally, those who have the permit. And that becomes something like 10 or 20 individuals per month. So at the moment, no one, because there is a law of protecting wild animals, and you can't shoot everybody. And there is another problem. The more the municipality of Haifa is doing better job, other cities, which are very close to Haifa, it's not like in the US, and you can see from one city, 10 or 20 other cities which are very close, they will suffer more. Even now we can see that they're doing a better job, and then you can see the same problems coming up in neighboring cities.
So they're not really trying to limit the population growth. They're just trying to measure human-wildlife conflict.
Exactly.
And so the urban ecology, I mean, we raise pigs. Pigs destroy everything. That's why Indiana had so many oak hickory forests, because of the wild, what was it? Like out of every 7 acres, there was one wild pig in 1910. And so they're really a disturbance to the ecology. So they really don't care about the urban ecology. They just care about protecting this sort of charismatic species. Is that correct?
I'll be even more cynic. I would say that the municipality is care about a human-animal relationship and conflict.
Okay.
If they live over there in the valley, it's even not the authority of the municipality. No, it's the authority of one of the green organizations to take care of them.
Gotcha.
They want to take the next election. And there are more than one politician who promised that he will deal with that problem in 3 months, which apparently is impossible. if you do everything that it takes with a lot of money, it might take 3 to 4 years, more than one cadence probably.
Oh, yeah. I love this work because we did a study on Bloomington and the deer population years ago. And honestly, even though the species are greatly different, I would argue the outcomes of your research are parallel what we found too, when it comes to trust in the governance process, trust with municipality, when it comes to a lot of what emerges significant. I don't think it's terribly dissimilar. I think it all lines right up. So I appreciate this. And I have more questions, but
I think Shannon and Ariana, and then I have one, and then if James wants to go, or anybody else.
One is a comment on your note. Yale does a climate change survey where they ask about a bunch of different policies, and they do see some interesting variants. So I agree that I think it would be interesting from both like a policy perspective.
Which one? Can you repeat that?
It's the Yale climate change survey. And it fully has no policy relationship to this, but at least they're asking of different questions. Kind of, it makes it easier to break down why people are for or against taxes. Secondly, you really hammered home that the framing of this as an environmental issue is particularly important. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to why that is.
Why that is the main issue?
Yeah, well, I guess like, why is this important that it's an environmental management issue versus like a human health issue?
Yeah,
or like a safety issue.
Actually, as I mentioned in the beginning, I think there is quite a lot of mess over there. I think there is more than one paper over there. I think there is not enough place to speak about local taxes and remedy. You have to pick one of them or to split it into two. I think the clash between wild boars or wild animals in urban space or in local politics, the fact that wild boars are considered as local stakeholders, local agents who affect the reality, affect policies, affect politicians, affect political behaviors. I think, do you see other way to frame it?
I mean, I guess like, to me, it's just like a planning crisis. Mainly because I don't think there's inherent, it's a wildlife management space, but it doesn't seem like, kind of like James was saying, it's not like it's ecology-based issues. It's just like, should we eradicate or should we not? So basically it's like, should we implement a policy or should we not implement a policy? Which I think the framing of it as like a tax issue and a capacity issue, implementation may actually help strengthen it, while the context would just be wild boar management.
So you would have narrowed it down to wildlife management and not
because you're not asking, well, correct me if I'm wrong. Are you asking them like, what is your preference on the number of wild boars in the area?
No.
You're asking them like, how much would you prefer to be taxed to get rid of this problem?
Yes.
So I think the framing as a tax issue with like, oh, hey, we're looking at it, would differentiate it from other wildlife management of deers with like more of a willingness to pay aspect. And I think that's a really cool aspect of this.
Great, thank you.
Ariana?
I'm interested in point number 4. So you're finding that was contrary to your expectations, that people who had less info were more willing to pay. And it seems like you're interpreting that as information overload, that like, you know, oh, I don't want to know all that. I don't want to do all this, you know, and I think that's one interpretation. But I also wonder if when they don't have the information, there is the like warm glow of the idea that they get to envision, that they get to come up with ideas and what they think would work. And when there's specifics, then you quibble with the specifics. And when you don't know what the specifics are, then you can imagine them ideally. And so I wonder if also, if that would be then getting into the specifics of the policy, then you would know if they're agreeing or disagreeing with the particular modes of engagement, rather than just, maybe people are overwhelmed. But I also feel kind of nervous about advocating for like people having less information. Which I don't know that's necessarily what you're doing, but like, oh, people will be more willing to pay if we don't tell them all of the information. Makes me kind of squirm.
Yeah, it sounds bad. And that's why we hypothesized the opposite. We thought that it is good to share information, and we're talking about political participation. And yeah, I agree. This should be, we saw in the COVID, for example, it's good to let people know what is going on, to give them tool to think and consider their steps. And yet, from a practical, not practical, but the data says that we preferred not to know, or they were more cooperative, or when they knew less, maybe at that specific point of time. Maybe they're already overloaded, you know. It's not the first time that they see the problem of wild boars in the survey. They know much more about it in an earlier age. So I'm not sure the survey it's perfect in that sense. But it's interesting. Yeah, you can think of it in other ways.
So I have a question on this point, and then I think we had, did you have your hand up, Gustavo? So I have two kinds of questions. I think this is super and really interesting. I think in terms of the detailed policy question, right? This is maybe a unique policy area in that case, right? Because COVID, maybe we wanted more information because you wanted to be able to take actions that could protect yourself, right? And you wanted to know the constraints within which you could take those actions, right? That was why people wanted information when it came to COVID. And whether they believed it or not was obviously related to the trust things they've already proved. In this case, I could imagine a large portion of the population being like, I don't care how you handle the hogs, handle them, and we will pay you to do so. Right? Like, kill them all, don't kill them all. Actually, to kill them all, I don't want to know, frankly, right? Like, I could imagine a pretty large portion of the population feeling that way, especially that don't have like direct experience thinking about and managing hogs, right? Here's this problem, I got to deal with it. I didn't expect to have to deal with it living in Haifa, and now I got to deal with it. You deal with it, I will pay you to do so. I don't care what you do. Right? And so I think that is like an issue differentiator in some ways because of what it requires of individuals, right? A COVID policy situation requires a lot of decision-making by individuals within a particular constrained context. This maybe not so much. And so that I think is kind of an interesting differentiator, right? It might suggest something about the nature of what a policy, either what a policy requires of citizens might shape how much information they really want to have about it. So that's one question I have. I have a broader question that sort of speaks to Shannon's question, I think also to Dan's and somewhat to Bernie's, because you've been hearing a lot of other cases coming up in this conversation, right? About deer, about bears, and so I guess it's really a direct question for you. What do you see as sort of the relevant set of alternatives if you were to either compare this to something or compare respondents' answers to something? What is the relevant set of alternatives? Because I think that might help you with your framing questions. If you're thinking about what is unique about the hog issue, then thinking about deer versus fox, I can think of wolves now been reintroduced into like parts of like Summit County, Colorado, right? And then you'd want to say, okay, well, is it the urban thing, or is it specifically something about the nature of the species and the kind of threat they might present? If you might be less interested in that kind of relevant alternative, and instead whether citizens are more or less willing to pay for particular kinds of policies, right? Then it seems like you could say, okay, we have this really interesting thing, right, about them being willing to pay for this, not really wanting to know a whole lot about it. What happens if you do tell them a whole lot about what the options are? Do we think that like they are more or less willing, like contingent on their trust that the money is actually going to be spent in this way? We think they're more or less willing to support each one of these kinds of policies. And what does this tell us about their sort of elasticity of their willingness to pay, right? within this specificity question, within this sort of what they know about the municipalities. So all of that is like a sort of broader arching question of like, for you, what do you see as a sort of relevant set of comparative, like sort of alternatives, either for citizens in terms of their choice among sort of policies, or in terms of policies, in terms of what you would compare to what kinds of species? And I guess sort of what your intuition is behind that question might then sort of point clear framing direction.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really long.
It's very interesting framing. Thank you. I would say that there is something specific, I think, in this case. I haven't mentioned that yet, but as you might know, wild boars, pigs, or pork are unclean animals for Jewish and Muslims who are the residents of Haifa. And actually, we have found in many other analyses a relation between religiousness and like those who are more religious were more had a greater feelings of being harmed by wild boars. Probably they are more sensitive to this issue and are more willing to pay more taxes. So it might be a different species, but obviously I think there is a good point here to see that in a wider frame compared to other things. And I got the feeling when it comes to public participation, I think that the average normal Haifa residents doesn't want to be a part of this issue. I mean, they have no patience, they have no time. I think what we as researchers think about political participation, I think they are in a different space. I think they're saying to themselves, I paid you my taxes, do your job. Don't ask me, what should I do? This is your job. Ask the questions, give the answer. Except for those unique people who are in favor of co-production, which is a different way of participation. And we know it happens when it's very, very relevant to you. I think most of the people, the average people, don't want to be involved in the details.
So that's an interesting question because it's a political culture question then. Right? And then you would want to say, okay, to somebody facing a similar challenge in a different political context, would you see a difference of like, oh, I want to weigh in on this because it's my duty and my right as a citizen to be informed and contribute to policy, right? As opposed to not at all. That's either issue specific or it could be culture specific. And that is a super interesting question that like you could decide to take up or not. I just think it's really interesting. And this sort of lends itself to thinking about that.
Okay, thanks.
So next, sorry, I forgot. Next, I got so into my question, I forgot. Next was Diego and then Gustavo, and then back to James.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much. Very interesting research. I have two main questions or ideas around. The first of all, talking about the information element, probably something that can help a little bit there is information theories. Talking about the asymmetry that we were talking is not the same for an operational level, for constitutional level, which are the kind of information that we actually need, but also the timing. As you were saying, there's people that probably don't have time. And for me as conductor, we know that if we are in a very fast thing, nobody's looking to us. If everyone is focused on their thing, give it little information. But if we are like in this process, we have time to share more information. For me, it was not actually a surprise that less information is going to create this kind of situation. But going to the second question, that is more around, you were saying that while living on animals have been thought as a stakeholders of this action arena. But like what I am seeing is like humans and wilds as opposites and how we are gonna eradicate them or put it out of our urban space to be safe. Do you see any kind of potential living spaces there, or because of religious is the problem of they don't want?
I think I saw 2 points. One of them is the feeders who joined or adopt, even there are some specific wild boars in Haifa who has names, who all the neighbors already know them, feed them and so on. So you have this phenomena. And I think that from a political point of view, the oppositions joined the wild boars against the mayor. I mean, all the term, this is the first issue. You can see it's replaced the air pollution, which was for decades the most important problem in Haifa, which is an industrial city. It's looked like as if air pollution is not an issue anymore, which is not the case, but it's not in the news anymore. So I think many residents and political agents and politicians, especially from the opposition, made some kind of coalition with the wild boars against the mayor. So you can see that as some kinds of abusive use, but still they are part of the discourse in Haifa.
Yeah.
And information theories, it's a great, I didn't know, I was not aware of that direction, and thank you, it's a good direction.
Just as an add-on to that quickly. So the mayor doesn't get reelected and this majority group of the city council gets a new mayor in, they still got the problem.
Yeah.
And now they can't pitch it against the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
You have any sense of where they think they're going to go with that?
They are very wise. At the moment, they're just blaming her, and they don't have real other different solutions.
Okay.
I think they pray that they won't have to deal with that. Like many of them are going against her, but obviously only one of them, which might be even not part of the current opposition, will have to deal with that.
Yeah.
It went very far. I can tell you that the mayor is tweeting about the opposition's member who do not allow her to take care of, to allow some budgets to take care of the wild boars. She claimed that they prefer her to fail and that the wild boar problem will not be solved in order to defeat her in the coming elections in the next October. By the way, she turned around, she has already decided to go back to signing after 3 years, like not on the server timing, but since then she has already admitted she made some kind of mistake and decided to go back to signing.
Gustavo had the last question. If we have time, we can get James back in there. All right, we have 5 minutes.
So maybe I have a different perspective, or maybe it's closer to James' questions. Like I think deep down we all understand that while boards and urban life are pretty much incompatible, and then we all understand that there is a, the solution is the simple solution is just the rifle and kill the wild boars or relocate the wild boars. You don't need extra taxes for those solutions, essentially. You may even get money, so people may be willing to pay you for the right to kill the boars, essentially. Then relocation may require a little bit amount of money, but maybe not that much. I think the main issue that is going on here, and it shocked me, but I think it's something more general in politics, is that societies get stuck with very small problems and they cannot solve these very simple problems. So Haifa is what, the second, third city of Israel? They cannot take out wild boars out of the streets. Come on. So essentially it's really, so, and then the problem, I think, it's the citizens. So I'm not going to be blaming the governments. The problem is the citizens. We are asking our politicians to solve unsolvable problems. Essentially, we want to take the pigs out of the street, but we don't want to kill the pigs, or we don't want to relocate the pigs. So essentially, we are offering them essentially with a crazy trade-off. And the only way of solving that for the politicians is to lie to us. essentially what Chess was suggesting is like, one night I send the police, kill all the wild boars, problem disappear, everybody's happy. But then trust in government is going down because somebody discovered that citizens have been, they have been lied. Okay, so it's like, so I think we need to kind of change our political culture and be more, mature in the way we face options, like previous generations did. In my grandparents' hometown, every time that the pig was escaping, teenagers in the square would go, get the rifle, kill the pig, and then big barbecue next weekend. Problem over. So essentially, I think
It's not going to happen in Israel.
in Israel, maybe that good. Police can do it at zero price. At zero. So essentially, I think what you have is a very, very interesting problem on how dysfunctional our political systems are becoming because citizens cannot take basic trade-off and then, pick one option. So it's like, in some sense, I find it a tremendous project, little project of what is going on in many other government areas and many other countries, okay? Anyway.
Can I respond to Gustavo?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can you respond to Gustavo? And then you.
So my question, so I didn't get the sense that people wanted to get rid of the pigs. That's not how I interpret. They like the pigs.
We didn't ask.
No, I don't. They would have liked them to disappear.
Without having to.
They would.
Without killing them.
Yeah.
Killing them. Okay.
Nobody wants to admit it. Only
is not
yes.
a clean solution.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So essentially,
The Israeli, they want something complex enough or
Plausible deniability.
yeah,
so the problem is like
they have to cheat them, like to turn it around.
Yeah. Can I put a, so that's why I think it's a more general thing. The more general thing is like when people want something, they don't want the means for that outcome. And this is screwing our political systems, essentially. It's a serious problem. You want the outcome, you don't want the means to that outcome because it makes you feel bad. So that's a problem. This is a serious problem, essentially. It's a serious problem.
But if they put the pigs.
You want the outcome. And then
Okay.
politicians need to start.
Actual question, James, last question, and then you get to wrap up and respond in full.
It is. Have you thought about, there's a method that a grad student educated me on called the narrative policy framework. And I think it's exactly what you're doing, but narrative policy framework is like, a system for using various types of narratives to compare responses on policy. I didn't get the sense that that's what you followed, but I think you inherently just did it. And so I'm wondering if you know much about that, or if you've ever thought about it.
No, I will.
I think it's pretty good, and I think it could go down. It very much would jive with what you're working on.
Yeah, as I said,
I'll talk to you about afterwards. Thank you very much.
You welcome, sir. Thank you very much. Excellent comments, which make me work hard again. So I'm very far from the end of this project, but thank you very much all.